Georgia Senate runoffs just a few weeks away. As I've been telling you, this is absolutely critical. I want to get the most up-to-date information on this possible to all of you. For that, we bring in our friend Ryan Girdusky. He's the author of Theyre Not Listening, How the Elites Created a National Populist Revolution, and he is a political big brain. He's going to tell us what's going on here. Ryan, thanks so much for joining.
Thank you for having me.
What is happening right now with the early vote in Georgia? Tell us.
So as of right now, 750, as of this morning, 715,000 rather, people have voted in the state of Georgia. Georgia is one of the states, like many, that do not register people by party. So we don't know what person's party has come out and vote, but we do know their age and their race. So about 54.5% have been a non-Hispanic white, 33.1% have been non-Hispanic black. Most of the people are 49% of all those who have voted are over the age of 65. And most interestingly, about a little over 18,500 are people who did not vote in the 2020 general election. They're new voters.
So how's it looking right now for Loeffler and Perdue, the Republican candidates?
Well, ideally for Republicans, you want the black vote because blacks vote 90% or above. For the Democrats, you would like the black vote to be under 30%. They're at 33.1. It's been dropping every day. It was over 38% the first day. So the energy and momentum for a huge surge of Stacey Abrams voters, especially in the Atlanta metro area, has kind of diminished somewhat slightly as days go by. Now, one thing I've learned covering Georgia is that Stacey Abrams has a tendency to take credit for everything, either she does it or she doesn't do it. So Stacey
you mean the governor of Georgia, Ryan?
the governor of Georgia, exactly.
The fake governor of Georgia, yeah.
So she was talking about how she was getting 1.3 million absentee ballots out. A majority of those actually came from senior citizens, military personnel, and disabled who automatically get ballots. So they were not anyone that she was requesting for a ballot. They were people who would get ballots normally under Georgia law. As of right now, 1.6 million people total have requested absentee ballots, which, by the way, is crazy high. It's going to be a huge runoff election, much higher than past runoff elections.
So just so we can sort of some of the top line here, we have a Georgia runoff that is already showing that people are they're very focused on this. Ryan, I'm hearing from some folks on the right who don't want to say this that much publicly, but they are saying the Democrats could actually steal these two seats, that could happen, and everyone needs to take that very seriously. What do you say to that?
The law in Georgia the election laws in Georgia are probably some of the worst in the country, as far as I could tell. So, for instance, after it came out that Joe Biden was ahead in the vote count, Donald Trump requested a recount, which is perfectly legal for a loser to look for a recount. And they found between 3,000 or 4,000 more Trump votes during the recount in Georgia, which gave him a little bit of an edge, but it didn't put him over the number he needed to win. Now, if you remember, David Perdue was the winner of that election, but he didn't win enough he didn't get over 50% to avoid a runoff. So I simply asked, well, how much of those 3,000 or 4,000 did David Perdue get? And they said, oh, well, we can't count those because only the loser can request a recount. So they could not count any other of the votes besides the Donald Trump votes. So David Perdue very well could have ended up getting over 50% of the vote had he been able to request a recount, but he can't because of Georgia state law.
So he may. And to be clear, this is not even a little bit beyond the realm of possibility. What you're laying out here by the numbers, Perdue might have actually won enough to not even be in a runoff, but because of the Georgia laws, they weren't able to look for those irregularities that they did find for Trump that might have put Perdue over. So there's no runoff.
Correct. Yes, correct. And the Republicans would have
unbelievable.
The Senate. Yes. It is the most insane series of laws you've ever heard of in your life. A big problem that I've raised to a lot of people is these these ballot drop-offs. that they've been having. They have 20 in one county alone. And the question comes up of ballot harvesting. Now, it is illegal in the state of Georgia to ballot harvest. You can't deliver any other ballot besides your own. But the problem is and under the law, written in the words in the Georgia law, is that you have to have two people witness you dropping off a ballot. Well, now because of COVID, they made these ballot drop off boxes where you just walk into a box, you deliver it. But there's nobody watching these boxes to make sure that only one ballot is going in there at a time. They have a camera in these boxes, but the camera is only looking to see if someone, destroys the boxes, not if somebody delivers 50 or 60 ballots at one single time. There is so much money in Georgia, by the way, right now that Karl Rove could hire somebody to sit in front of every ballot drop-off place all day long, every single day, to make sure that no one's dropping off 60 or 70 ballots 30 times a day, but no one's doing that as of right now.
We're speaking to Ryan Girdusky, author of Theyre Not Listening, How the Elites Created a National Populist Revolution, and he's a political analyst. Ryan, tell me this. What is the GOP not doing in Georgia? I mean, let's put aside the issue of fraud for a second. There's also the possibility, it seems, that maybe they could win these 2 Senate seats fair and square based on all the money and attention that these races are getting. What do you make of that risk, and what would you want to see the GOP and these candidates and Trump and Pence do to make sure that we don't lose Senate control? Because I can handle whatever the outcome of the presidential election is. I feel like we can weather that storm. It gets a lot harder to weather it if the Democrats have the House and the Senate.
Yeah, so I can't overemphasize how much money and people there are right now in Georgia. So far in Georgia, the Republicans, not the Democrats, just the Republicans, have knocked about 6 million doors, which is basically every one of their voters 5 times over. They've done a tremendous GOTV job. There's tons of money being poured in. One of the major problems of the Trump campaign was that they did not have any money in the Chattanooga media market. Now, the Chattanooga media market is only 2% of Georgia, but it's in the most Republican area of Georgia. So all 2% are heavily Republican. It's in the 9th congressional now Congressman Marjorie Taylor Greene's congressional district, the second most Republican district of the state and the most Republican area of that congressional district. She did not have a Democrat opponent in the general election, and there was about 70,000 fewer voters in her district than in the neighboring district. And those are 2 of the most Republican areas of the state. So I hope that those mistakes, and I've reached out to several super PACs working in the state, and I've told them, you need to make sure I know it's only 2% of the state, but it is an important 2% of the state for Republicans that you should be advertising. I know Mitch McConnell and Karl Rove are spending a lot of time and energy down there as well as Donald Trump Jr. The president had a huge turnout. Mike Pence's turnout has been fairly low, honestly, right now. It has not been that strong as far as turning out a lot of people to his rallies goes. But the problem is the messaging that Trump gave early on, that don't vote early, vote day of, I think was the wrong message to really have. I think that voting early is really, really important. Because you don't know what's going to happen on election day. You get sick, your kid gets sick, there's a snowstorm, there's a hurricane, whatever the case is, and you can't get to the polls. And Democrats are definitely utilizing this early ballot system. As far as the problems that went on last time, I think that there is a major issue right now with the Secretary of State's office. It's not just the Secretary of State who's incompetent, which he is. He's basically just a rich guy who wanted to run for governor one day. So he ran for Secretary of State as a platform to then run for governor with no experience being Secretary of State. The Deputy Secretary of State, her last name is Fouche. I forget her first name. I think it's Diane, but it might not be Diane. It's Fouche is the last name, though. She's been making a lot of the calls, and she's incredibly incompetent. Her big plan earlier this year was she wanted to have Cardi B cut commercials for the state to ask for poll watchers. Now, if you're a Republican, what kind of poll watchers is Cardi B going to attract to sit there and make sure everything's going okay for your election? This is what the state is right now in the Secretary of State's office. So there's very little confidence there. And basically, since the senators have both called on him to resign because of his incompetency with this election, he has kind of been blowing a lot of people off.
So would you say it's on track, or are you concerned now about these 2 Senate seats that will determine control of the United States Senate for the next 2 years?
Well, I'm concerned. I mean, the landmark poll just came out. It's a pretty good polling firm in Georgia as far as polls go, which a lot of them have been off, but it's a pretty good polling firm. And they both had Loeffler and Perdue up by 1 point. The attack ads against Perdue are very, very effective, and he's not been able to really respond to them. And the fact of the insider trading and selling so many stocks, it's been very, 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 very effective. Now, that being said, Ossoff is a known quantity in Georgia because of his congressional run, his high-profile congressional run, and he's pretty well hated throughout Georgia. Nonetheless, if they're able to sit there and surge these people out of the inner city, we'll see. I will say the one thing going for Loeffler and Perdue that was not going for Trump is they do not alienate suburban white voters in the same capacity. Perdue and Loeffler both overperformed Trump, and well, really Perdue because Loeffler had another Republican, but Perdue overperformed Trump in the 6th and 7th congressional district, which are the 2 suburban Atlanta congressional districts that flipped from Republican to Democrat since 2018.
Just switching gears before we let you go, we're speaking to Ryan Girdusky, author of Theyre Not Listening, How the Elites Created a National Populist Revolution. Ryan, you and I have talked about this before, but I want you to lay it out for everybody. In the post-election analysis here, there was a problem for Trump with what was the primary? Was it white working class voters not turning out enough, or was it white college-educated suburban voters who either wouldn't vote for him or voted for Biden?
So the main problem with the Trump campaign was their idea always was, we're going to lose white college educated voters. It's kind of baked in the bread. So we're going to make up for that by getting more minority voters out. Now, in a state like Florida and a state like Texas, that idea worked, and it worked very, very well. They did an excellent job. And they did an excellent job, by the way, in almost every major city: Los Angeles, New York, Philadelphia, Detroit, Cleveland, El Paso, Miami, all of these cities. Especially those that experienced surges of the Black Lives Matter riots, did vote more Republican, which was great. The problem is in places like Wisconsin, Arizona, Pennsylvania, there just were not enough of those voters to make up for it. The only way you were going to make up for that surge of college educated whites voting Democrat was by getting non-college educated whites to vote Republican, and more of them, and registering them. There was never a ground game in place at all by any Republicans for the last 4 years. And I brought this idea to Brad Parscale back in 2017. I said there are 47 million non-college educated white Americans who are not registered to vote. If you register 10% of them, you don't have a problem. And most of those people, by the way, live in the Midwest. They live in the swing states that Trump flipped from Obama. So it's not impossible to sit there and win every one of those states all over again. This is the truth about campaigns when it comes to voter registrations. It's very difficult, and there's not a lot of money in it. So there's not a lot of consultants who want to go run a voter registration organization. And looking how Brad Parscale made a lot of money off that campaign, it seems like he kind of took that advice of, there's not a lot of money in voter registration, let's look at doing other things. So they chased phantom Hispanic voters in New Mexico for 3 years. And lo and behold, I mean, it just didn't work out. I'll say this one statistic for you before we go, because I know we're running out of time. There were 23 counties that flipped from Obama to Trump in Wisconsin. 22 of those 23 counties, Trump increased his percentage, and they had over 90% turnout. Basically, everybody you possibly want to do, they did. Great ground game. But the number of registered voters in those 23 counties decreased by 8,000, even though the population increased, because there was no effort on the part of the GOP to register new voters in those areas, especially those who've kind of fallen by the wayside, don't believe the politicians help them. That is the Roseanne voter, the shameless voter, those people, those kind of characters who are in our country who feel like government doesn't respond to their needs. They're the ones who need to be tapped into. And there was no effort on part of the GOP, the RNC, the Trump campaign, thanks to Jared Kushner, to reach out to those voters. They would have made the absolute difference. And voter fraud aside, he would have been able to win a bunch of those states that he lost.
Ryan Girdusky, check out his book, Theyre Not Listening, available on Amazon. Ryan, always insightful, man. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Hey Team Buck, thank you so much for watching The First on YouTube. If you like this video, please click that little thumbs up button so then it will log as liked. And also, if you want to see more great content from The First, please click subscribe.